Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Good Dogs Community Lead. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us for another Good Breeder webinar. And today we are going to be presenting on setting up for success, the science of dog socialization. So kind of taking a very different direction from these webinars that we've been doing in the past, which have been really focused on reproduction and nutrition. So this is a really exciting new topic for us to dive into. And we are joined by our guest, Dr. Annie Valuska, who is going to be presenting today on that topic. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be focusing on today. When it comes to raising an outstanding pet dog, one of the most important tools in a breeder's arsenal is socialization. Backed by the latest scientific research, this presentation will cover what socialization actually means, why it's important, and provide step-by-step instructions for how to establish a strong behavioral foundation for your dog. So I imagine this is going to be extremely helpful for so many of our breeders, especially those who have litters on the ground right now for the summer, and you can start implementing some of these hopefully right away. As always, we're really excited to partner with Purina to bring you this webinar. This is something, like I mentioned, that we're really excited to be able to cover and bring to our community, and we imagine that it's going to be super helpful for so many of you. I know a lot of you have shared in the past that you're interested in learning more about puppy socialization, so that's why we're bringing it to you today. So please, as always, continue sharing with us what you'd like to see us cover next, things you're wondering about, things you have questions about as it relates to canine health and behavior, because it allows us to bring you presentations just like this. So please continue sharing what's on your mind. And as always, during the Q&A segment of this presentation, we have some previously submitted questions from our community already that we're going to just prioritize answering. But of course, use the chat throughout the entire presentation to share your thoughts, ask your questions, and we'll do our best to answer those as well. And before I pass things over to Dr. Valuska, I want to share a little bit about Good Dog for anyone who's new here and totally unfamiliar with who we are. Good Dog is on a mission to build a better world for our dogs and the people who love them by advocating for dog breeders like yourselves, educating the public through events just like this, and promoting canine health and responsible dog ownership. We use the power of technology to help our good breeders level up their breeding programs and provide them with tools like our secure payment system to protect them from scams, our software to post your available litters and start connecting with Good Dog applicants from all across the country to find great homes for your puppies. So if you're not yet a member of our community, we would absolutely love to have you join us, and you can do so by applying at gooddog.com/join, which we will drop in the chat. And I want to share a little bit more about Dr. Valuska before I pass things over to her. Dr. Valuska brings over 20 years of animal behavior experience to her role as a principal scientist on Purina's pet behavior team. After receiving her doctorate degree in animal behavior from the University of California, Davis, Dr. Valuska went on to serve as the postdoctoral behavior research fellow at Disney's Animal Kingdom before joining Purina in 2013. We have to sidebar about that later because that's a dream job of mine. I've watched a few day in the life at Disney documentaries about the people that work at Animal Kingdom with the animals, and I think that's the coolest thing ever. Anyway, since then, Dr. Valuska has used her expertise to serve as the voice of the pet, ensuring that the needs of dogs are kept top of mind in all of Purina's products and outreach efforts. She's frequently interviewed for podcasts, TV news stories, and newspaper articles, and she can also be found on TikTok and Instagram at Annie Knows Animals. We can drop that in the chat for anyone interested in following her along. So Dr. Valuska, I will now pass things over to you to get our presentation started.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to get the opportunity to speak with all of you today. So as Nicole told you, my name is Annie Valuska. I'm on the pet behavior team at Purina. And as she said, my role really is to be the voice of the pet at the company. What that means is that it's my job to try to understand as much as possible how cats and dogs see the world and then use that knowledge to improve our products. And to do that, I start by really trying to think like a dog or a cat. So today I'm going to try to give you a little taste of that. My goal for the end of this presentation is that you are thinking about your dogs a little differently, maybe understanding them and their needs better, and ultimately will be in a better position to create happier, more social dogs based on some of the tips that I'll give to you. So to accomplish that, I will be covering kind of Dogs 101, just some basic information about them to make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to their behavior. Then I'll go over Socialization 101, same principle, just really get you familiar with what socialization means and how we're defining it through the talk. Then I'll get into some practical tips for how to implement what I've shared about socialization with your own dogs. And then I'll wrap up and hopefully we should have some time for questions. So let's dive into Dogs 101. So dogs and gray wolves are closely related. They diverged from a now extinct wolf species up to 40,000 years ago. And that's important because that means that our dogs have the genetic backbone of a social hunter. Now, a lot of people know that wolves live in packs and that dogs' ancestors likely lived in packs, but there's a lot of misunderstanding around what those packs actually are. So years and years ago, when wolves were studied, they were studied in captivity. And it turns out that when you introduce a bunch of adult, unrelated wolves to an enclosed space, you will get the kind of aggressive, fear-based, dominance-based hierarchy that so many people think of when they hear the phrase alpha dog. But more recently, when wolves were finally studied in their natural environment, we learned what those packs really are. And it turns out that wolf packs are just families. There are dominant individuals, it's the mom and the dad, and then the rest of the members of the pack are generally their offspring from the last few years. And so mom and dad are in charge. They are teaching those wolf pups how to be wolves. They are setting boundaries. They're, enforcing a certain standard of behavior. But again, it's more of a parental role. It's not really reliant on this kind of fear and aggression that I think comes up a lot in popular culture. So I think that's really important to understand about what kind of social structure our dogs evolved in and the role that we can play, much more like parents, much more authoritative than authoritarian. So this is how they evolved, but wolves and dogs differ quite a bit because dogs have been domesticated, and they have been domesticated for a very long time. Most of the evidence suggests it was about 14,000 years ago that the dogs that we know today started on that path. And what's really cool about how dogs got domesticated is that most of the evidence points to the fact that they likely essentially domesticated themselves. So what that means is that the friendliest proto dogs or wolves, there was variability in that population. Some of those proto dogs were a little bolder, a little more confident, a little friendlier, and so they were willing to tolerate people. And as a result of their willingness to be in proximity to us, they gained access to our resources. So that might have been some protection from other predators, but more likely it was our food. So the scraps that we weren't eating, our garbage piles. So as a result of gaining access to those resources, they survived well and reproduced well. And some of their offspring would have also been bold and friendly and willing to tolerate humans. And over several generations, we now have the friendly dogs that we know today. And because of that process of domestication, there were many physical and behavioral changes. Many of the physical changes that we see in dogs compared to wolves are explicitly linked to the domestication process. This is called domestication syndrome, and it is true almost across the board of domesticated animals. So as humans select for behavioral changes that we like, so as we select for tamer, friendlier, more tolerant animals, just because we are selecting for those behaviors, we start to see physical changes that are linked to those behaviors at a genetic level. And those changes are things like floppy ears, spotted coats, larger eyes, shorter faces, curled tails. Many of these traits are the traits that juvenile animals have. But when it comes to domestication, those juvenile traits are carried into adulthood in a process called neoteny. So again, this happens in dogs. They have the floppy ears and the curled tails and the spots, but you can also see this in other domesticated animals like pigs, rabbits, a lot of different animals. So a really cool physical process. And there are also behavioral changes that come from domestication, and those are also neotenous. So essentially these juvenile traits are being carried into adulthood. So adult dogs will play into their senior years, whereas wolves you tend to only see play in very young animals. They are also a lot friendlier. They are much more approachable by people. So again, a lot of these juvenile traits carry into adulthood. There's another really cool physical change that underlines this theory that dogs probably domesticated themselves because of our food, which is that one of the biggest genetic changes between dogs and wolves is that dogs' digestive system is quite different. There are changes in their digestive system that allow them to better process carbohydrates. And this is likely a result of the fact that as they were evolving into dogs, they were scavenging on the carb heavy diet of humans. I don't know about you, but I sure like my carbs. So that's a very likely scenario. Another key behavioral change in dogs compared to wolves is their extremely strong, unique bond with people. This could be a whole other talk. There's so much cool science out there on it, but I'll just share a few tidbits with you to help convince you that this is true. So one cool thing about dogs is that as long as they have any exposure to people, essentially, they are almost innately capable of following our gaze. So they will look at our eyes and attend to what we are looking at. And they will also, again, without any training, follow our pointing gesture. So if you point at one bowl of food over another one, dogs are likely to follow your point and eat from that bowl instead of the other one. And I know this doesn't sound like much, and for those of you that have had dogs for years, I think it's easy to take it for granted. We know that, yeah, our dogs are doing this. They're paying attention to what we're looking at and what we're pointing at. But this is actually a really, really unique behavior. Dogs' closest living relatives, the wolves, cannot do this. Even if they are raised with people and trained on following a pointing gesture, most wolves still can't do it. And our closest living relative, chimpanzees, can't do it at all, even with extensive training. So this seemingly simple thing really speaks to the fact that dogs have spent thousands of years really getting closer to us and paying attention to what's important to us. Another really cool fact I love that just shows what a special bond we have with dogs involves the oxytocin loop. So oxytocin is a hormone. It's also known as the cuddle hormone or the love hormone. It is released when a mother is looking at her newborn baby. It's released when two people that are deeply in love are close to each other. And it is also released when a person looks into the eyes and pets their pet dog. So that's, I don't think, a surprise to many of us. We know how good it makes us feel, those warm, fuzzy feelings when we're interacting with our beloved dogs. But what's really cool is that the same thing happens in our dogs. So when our dogs are looking at us, they are also releasing oxytocin and feeling those warm, fuzzy feelings towards us. And again, this is a really special phenomenon that speaks to the bond. And I tell you all this up front because you're going to hear come up later in this talk the importance of leveraging the special relationship that we have with our dogs and the power of that social bond, and also the power of food and what a powerful tool that can be as we try to shape our dog's behavior and create these very well socialized pets. So that's Dogs 101. Now let's get into Socialization 101. I'm going to start with a definition because you're going to hear me say socialization several more times throughout this talk, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So from the AVMA website, socialization is the process of preparing a dog to enjoy interactions and be comfortable with other animals, people, places, and activities. And I think potentially the part of that definition that I think most people understand is it's about getting the dog used to all this stuff. But I think a part of the definition that a lot of people miss is that it's getting the dog to enjoy that stuff. And socialization is important because it really does help create dogs that are going to thrive in a home environment. If the environment in your kennel or breeding setup is lacking significant elements of a home-like environment, then you may be breeding puppies that are doing great in your kennel, but are not going to be very well prepared for a life in home. And this is really the through line of the entire talk. Now, as I mentioned, that enjoy piece is a really important part of the definition. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that socialization is just about exposure, but that's really the equivalent of thinking you can teach a child to swim by just throwing him in the deep end. It may work for some kids, but you can usually end up with far more success and a child who has a far higher opinion of swimming if you manage that exposure to water more carefully and ensure that they're really well equipped for each step in the process. And it's the same way when it comes to socializing your dogs. So I'm going to hopefully help you figure out how to give those swimming lessons instead of just tossing your dogs in the deep end. So when it comes to socializing well, there are three key factors that I think are very important. The first is timing is everything, and we'll talk about what I mean by that. The second is that it is your job to create positive experiences. So not just the exposure, but making sure that the dog is having a good time as you're creating these exposures. And third, reward what you would like to see the dog repeat. And I'll go over all of these in more detail. So we'll start with timing is everything. When it comes to the socialization period, that is the period from 3 weeks to 12 weeks. From birth to 3 weeks is what's known as the primary period. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But 3 to 12 weeks is when you have the opportunity to make the absolute biggest impact on your dog. And the critical period within that socialization window, potentially the most important time to get in there and start to create these positive experiences, is the period from 3 to 5 weeks. Now, that may sound a little daunting. Some of you might have older dogs. I get questions about socializing adults that are ready to retire and aren't where you like them to be. So the good news is that even old dogs can learn new tricks. The job gets a lot harder. It may take more steps, but dogs are in fact always learning from us because they're paying so much attention to us. So the best time to start is now. It's not too late. Start now. The flip side of dogs always learning is that you don't just get to set it and forget it. Socialization should be a lifelong process, regardless of when it starts. So let's talk a little bit more about these different periods from birth to 12 weeks. So the first period, the primary period, is birth to 3 weeks of age. And the dogs are there's little potatoes at this point, right? Their eyes and ears aren't open. They are primarily relying on their senses of smell and touch, as their eyes and ears are not fully functional yet. So even though they don't seem like there's much going on, they're not doing too much. There is a lot of evidence that it is not too early to start. One study found that frequent gentle handling from birth to 3 weeks of age resulted in significantly calmer puppies at 8 weeks of age. And this made an even bigger impact. So the difference between handled and unhandled puppies was even greater in kenneled dogs than it was from dogs in a home environment. So in these larger scale breeding operations, this early intervention, this gentle handling from birth to 3 weeks, is even more important. And another study found that puppies that were exposed to this early stimulation ended up more resilient to stress as adults. So the first study, 8 weeks, that's pretty impressive, birth to 8 weeks. But this handling they got in the first 3 weeks, according to this study, made a difference in adult dogs, specifically dogs that were handled gently as puppies in the 0 to 3 week period had improved cardiovascular function, improved adrenal and immune function as well. So not much effort required, big payoffs both at 8 weeks and into adulthood. And I suspect if we studied the dogs at more time points, we would find evidence of benefits for those ages as well. Once they pass the 3 week mark, they are officially into the socialization period. And as I mentioned, the most sensitive period for socialization is 3 to 5 weeks. Here they start to get more independent, they are more mobile, they start to play with one another and really learn their canine social skills from their litter mates and to some extent from their moms. And this is the stage at which puppies can most easily learn that something is safe. So at this age, especially that 3 to 5 week window, the puppy's natural response to something new is going to be fear, and that includes to people. But this age is also when that fear can be overcome the easiest with just a few positive experiences, just a few positive exposures, you can overcome that fear. Whereas if you don't get the puppy exposed to something in this 3 to 12 week period, You can still overcome it eventually, but it's your job, as I said earlier, is going to be a lot harder. So the timing is everything, right? That is meaningful when it comes to time in the dog's life. So getting in there from birth to 12 weeks, really important. Timing is also really important when it comes to the timing of these socialization sessions. And this is going to vary depending on the individual dog. It's really going to be important to find the right duration and frequency for socialization for the dog that you are working with. You definitely want to err on the side of shorter, more frequent bouts to start with, especially for a dog that hasn't had any socialization, like an adult dog, for example. And the reason that this is a safer bet is because you really, really, really don't want to stress the dog or create a negative experience. So you have a better likelihood of creating a positive experience, not creating too much stress if you leave it in shorter bouts to begin with. Timing is also really important when it comes to when you are providing positive reinforcement. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So that's principle number one. Timing is everything. Principle number two is that it is your job to create positive experiences. So as I've said before, and we'll say again, mere exposure to various stimuli is not going to be enough for true socialization. And I think one study showed this quite well. They found that adult dogs that had a noise phobia, so for example, a strong fear reaction to thunder or fireworks, those dogs were more likely than dogs that did not have a noise phobia to have experienced thunder or fireworks when they were less than 4 months old. So what this study is essentially saying is that dogs are better off, for example, never having been exposed to fireworks as a puppy than they are having been exposed to fireworks and having a negative experience, not learning that fireworks are safe and nothing to be afraid of. If they are just exposed and you're not managing how they feel about that exposure, if you aren't giving them a positive experience, then they are going to stay fearful, and that's going to carry into adulthood. In order to reduce the likelihood of fear, you want to make sure that you're not introducing too many new things at once. You really want to break this down into the smallest little pieces that you can. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Essentially, you don't want to force a dog to spend too much time out of their comfort zone. We want them to stay interested in what's going on, but not having a super strong emotional response. And the best way to do that, the way I like to think of it, and many trainers will talk about this, is to build a staircase. So let's say you ultimately want your dog not to be afraid of a vacuum cleaner. You are not going to go straight to a big, loud vacuum running, close to the dog. You are going to take it step by step and build a staircase towards that endpoint. And that starts with finding out the dog's threshold. So as I mentioned just now, what you're targeting is a dog that is interested. They're aware that something new is happening, but they are not freaking out. They're not stressed. That's the sweet spot. So you need to do some homework and test to see where your dog's fear level is. Some dogs, there's a lot of variability in behavior. Some dogs are going to be fine with that vacuum running right next to them from the get-go. Other dogs, if it's in the same room, that might be too much. So you need to manage this really carefully. Start kind of worst case scenario, assume that they're going to be fearful of everything, and really gradually expose it. So let's say we have a dog that is, attentive, perked up, but not fearful as long as the vacuum is at least 20 feet away. So you would start with the vacuum that far away, and then gradually, as the dog gets exposed to the vacuum, is calm, you can move that vacuum closer and closer. Now, for some dogs, you will be able to accomplish this in one session. For other dogs, you won't be able to. So again, it's really going to be based on the dog's response. As long as they are not experiencing fear or anxiety, and we'll talk about how to identify that in a bit, you can continue going, but err on the side of shorter, more frequent sessions for now. So let's say over the course of 3 sessions, you are now at the point where the vacuum can be close to the dog doesn't care. Great. Now you can introduce another component of what makes a vacuum scary, which is the noise. So you would want to start low. So you probably wouldn't want to plug the vacuum in. Maybe you record the vacuum running on your phone from another room and then play the recording for your dog. Depending again on their reaction, you would start with a low volume of that recording. And then as the dog gets used to it, you can gradually, either within one session or over the course of several sessions, depending on the dog's response, increase the volume. Once the dog is okay with the vacuum in the room and the sound of the vacuum going, then you can plug it in, get the real sound going, and then after that, you can start to move the vacuum. Again, probably starting from 20 feet away again and gradually working towards getting closer. And I know that sounds like a lot. Some dogs, it's going to take several sessions to work up to that if they have a more fearful temperament or just find the vacuum really scary for some reason. Other dogs, you might essentially get to take an elevator instead of a staircase. They're just going to have a much more open response to everything. I will say that the dogs that get the gentle handling from birth to 3 weeks and are socialized from 3 to 5 weeks and 3 to 12 weeks, you are more likely to get to take an elevator as you start to expose them to new things. Dogs that do not have proper socialization, especially from 3 to 12 weeks, those are the ones where you're going to have really tall staircases with lots of steps. So that's why it's so important to build this solid foundation when they're young. Another piece of creating these positive experiences is not just ensuring that they're not feeling fearful, but actually rewarding them for being calm and interested. And that's the behavior we want. We want a dog that's kind of unflappable, unfazed by everything. So when you see the dog reacting that way to a new stimulus, you want to make sure you reward it. And the best reward is going to vary, again, depending on the dog. For some dogs, it's going to be food. As I mentioned, they've kind of evolved to really enjoy food. This can be great to save those jackpot treats for. Some dogs are going to be more enticed by praise or petting, and other dogs might be most urged on by getting access to a favorite toy. So be creative, try a lot of different things if you're not getting the response that you want, but it's really important to find a reinforcer or a reward that's going to work for the dog that you are working with. We want it to be meaningful to them so that they have that positive experience and get something out of it. Okay, so talked about timing, talked about how to create positive experiences. Principle number 3, reward what you would like to see repeated. So if your dog is responding well to socialization, if they're calm, then it's important to provide high value, well-timed rewards to communicate to the dog that that's the right response to the vacuum cleaner. Where a lot of people make a mistake is they think that offering comforting words, so essentially praise, talking to the dog, petting the dog, providing a treat when the dog is displaying fear, they think that they're providing reassurance, that they're telling the dog, it's okay, look, here, have a treat, feel better. I'll pet you, feel better. But what you're actually doing when you reinforce that fearful behavior is you're reinforcing the fear. You're making the dog think that the fear is the appropriate response, and you are making them more likely to be fearful in the future. So as you are providing these rewards, it is very, very important to ensure that you are only providing rewards when the dog is calm, when the dog is doing what you would like to see them do more of. If your dog is showing fear, what you need to do is back off the stimulus that you are offering. So if you have the vacuum cleaner 10 feet away and your dog is displaying fear, get the vacuum cleaner back to 15 feet away. You don't want to cross that threshold, but you definitely don't want to reward the fearful behavior. If you do this well and you reward the calm behavior, then what you're doing at a neurological level is you are linking this new experience. Dog is calmly responding to the vacuum cleaner. They're getting rewarded for it. So they are now linking this exposure to something new and something good happens. And this is going to do 2 really cool things. First, it's going to build a positive association with, for example, the vacuum cleaner. They are going to associate the positive feelings that they have when they get the treat and the vacuum cleaner comes out. Eventually, that exposure, that association is going to persist even when the treats aren't on offer. They're just going to have general good vibes towards the vacuum cleaner because of the experiences of getting treats with the vacuum cleaner. But over time, as you socialize to the vacuum cleaner and to a hair dryer and to fireworks and all these other things, your dog is going to learn that when new things show up, good things happen. And this is actually going to create dogs with positive cognitive biases. So you are going to be creating dogs that, when confronted with something new in adulthood, because of all the positive experiences they had with new stuff when they were younger, they're going to assume, oh, this new thing must be good. They have that positive cognitive bias. They are not going to see something new and assume it's going to be something bad or scary. They're going to think, okay, what reward am I going to get as a result of this? So really, really powerful stuff that you're doing if you create this socialization process or the socialization staircase effectively. Now, I've talked about how important it is to ensure that you are rewarding calm behavior. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about canine body language. And I'm sure many of you are very experienced dog owners, probably years of dog owning experience. That doesn't mean you're out of the woods. And several studies have come out lately. This is one of, I think, the most interesting. This particular study wanted to assess how good people were at interpreting canine body language, and they wanted to compare dog owners and non-dog owners. And the scenario that they used for this were videos of dogs interacting with children. Now, in this particular study, the dogs in all of the videos that were shown were scared. And this was agreed upon by a panel of experts. Veterinarians and behaviorists agreed, yep, the dogs in these videos are very anxious and fearful around these children. So they showed these clips to dog owners and non-dog owners to see if the groups could accurately pick up that the dogs were fearful and whether there were differences in people that had a lot of dog experience and people that had no dog experience. What they found was no one was very good at this. They asked 71 people, and even though 100% of the clips had the dog as fearful, almost 70% of respondents thought the dog was confident and relaxed. So that's a pretty big miss. There is a big difference behaviorally between a stressed dog and a confident dog, and 70% of the people in this study could not see that difference. Most of the people that could see that difference were not dog owners. Dog owners did significantly worse at this than non-dog owners did. And what the authors concluded was that having experience with a dog without any theoretical knowledge to back that up resulted in confidence, misplaced confidence. So people that had a lot of experience with dogs didn't think that they needed to learn anymore. They had formed an opinion about what a happy dog looked like, and they were very confident in that opinion. But unfortunately, in many cases, those opinions are wrong. And so I'm going to spend the next few slides going through the behaviors you should be looking for when I talk about a calm, happy dog. These are the behaviors you should be looking for when you want to give the reward. So we'll start with what you don't want to reward, and that is fear or anxiety. So often when a dog is feeling fearful or anxious, they will be avoiding eye contact. You will see a lot of tension in the face and the body. So the ears are likely to be pinned back. The eyes may be held widely open. If they're open wide enough where you can see the white, that's called a whale eye. That's a great way to pick up on stress. You are going to see the mouth often held in a very straight line. There won't be any bit of a smile or no relaxation, really. It's going to be very tight. So eyes, ears, mouth. There will be tension in the body. You may see the dog arching over, trying to make themselves look as small as possible. The tail is likely to be tucked. It might even be held flat up against the belly. You may see them rolling over to show their belly. If they're lifting their paws up, even if they're standing on all fours, a raised paw can be a sign of stress in a dog. You may see this kind of grimace in the top right corner of the slide. There's a lot of videos on social media showing dogs engaging in this behavior, and they're funny videos. Everybody thinks that the dog is smiling or feeling guilty. Actually, that facial expression, when the teeth are exposed and the eyes are squeezed tightly shut, that is essentially a fear grimace. It's a submissive behavior. They are anticipating being punished, or they are reacting to the fact that the owner is getting agitated, is yelling, expressing anger, and they're trying to show submission. So this is an anxious dog when you see that smile. Um, you may also see dogs trying to escape, so moving farther away from the stimulus, or circling the room, trying to find a door or a corner. Freezing, standing very rigidly is another sign of fear. Yawning, excessive yawning is a sign that they're feeling tense. I mentioned the paw lifting when they're standing, and also shivering or excessive lip licking. So any kind of behavior that doesn't really seem to fit. So sneezing, sometimes if they're doing it a lot, yawning, sneezing, lip licking. If there's no reason for them to be doing that and you see it over and over again, that is usually a displacement behavior and a sign that the dog is feeling a little stressed. So if you see any of those behaviors, that's a sign that you have stepped too far on the staircase. You need to go back a step to get the dogs feeling more comfortable. Again, you do not want to offer comfort or praise or treats when the dogs are displaying any of these behaviors. You also wouldn't want to reinforce aggression. So aggression can look kind of similar to the fear behaviors. So this can require paying close attention. Again, there's going to be a lot of tension in the body, but whereas for a lot of the submissive behaviors, the eyes and ears are squeezed shut, pinned down. In dogs that are feeling more aggressive, they're trying to look bigger. So their ears will be up, pricked forward. You may see the fur on the back of their necks standing up. They may be kind of leaning forward on their front feet. A dog with bared teeth and closed eyes, as I mentioned, that's a submissive behavior. Bared teeth, open eyes, that is an aggressive behavior. And sometimes you will see ambivalent signals. Oh, the tail looks like they're experiencing fear, but they're also growling and baring their teeth at me. In the case of those ambivalent signals, assume the worst. So assume, even though the dog might look a little fearful, assume that it has aggressive intent, and react accordingly. You misreading those kinds of mixed signals is how fear aggression can happen. So if you see any of those fearful or stress signs, or a dog showing any of these aggressive signals, that is, again, a sign that you're too far on the staircase. It's time to back off and take a different approach. So that's what you want to avoid. Let's talk about what you're looking for. So what we're trying to target here is calm, confident, playful responses to the things you're trying to socialize the dogs to. So this is going to be very loose body language, kind of springy. You may see a paw coming towards you, or touching another dog. They should be interested, so alert, eyes open, watchful, but again, a lot less tension in the body than you see with either the fearful or aggressive dogs. Okay, so let's get down to the brass tacks here and offer some very practical tips for how you create well-socialized dogs. It really starts early. So puppies' experience begins in utero. So exposure of the dam to stressors while she's pregnant negatively impacts the immune status, neuroendocrine development, and social behavior of her pups. So you want to make sure that even the pup's mom is having a good time before they're born. Stressed dams may not provide adequate maternal care. And one study found that puppies from dams that did provide high levels of maternal care were less anxious, less fearful of novelty, more social, and more interactive with their environment. And that is going to be a more desirable pet. And that's also going to make your job a lot easier as you try to socialize. So it really does start with the mom. And the best way to reduce maternal stress is to offer control to her. Give her some control of her environment. This is true for animal well-being in general. The more control you can give them, the happier and often more productive they'll be. So one great way to do this is to create an environment where the dams can hide if they want to. And then after birth, giving the dams the choice to leave the puppies if they want to can really help with weaning as well, make it easier and a little bit healthier and less stressful for everybody. It's also really important not to isolate the dams too early. There's evidence that social contact is good for them, and that means contact with both other dogs and with people. Remember, humans are really, really important to them. They really do have a special bond with us, so they should continue to get human interaction throughout their pregnancy. And then opportunities for exercise while she's pregnant and the provisioning of environmental enrichment have also been linked to better maternal care. So the better care you can take of the moms before the puppies are on the ground, she's going to make your job a lot easier when it comes to socialization. So keep her in mind as well. So these next few slides are just some ideas for activities that can be conducted as the puppies grow. So starting from day one, there's stuff you can do. I talked about the benefits of that frequent, gentle handling. So it can be just gently picking the puppy up and cradling them, starting to pet them. Another important thing to do is to hold them vertically. So with their head above their tail and then their tail above their head, and also holding them on their back for a few seconds. This has been shown to be really important for their neurological development. So again, it seems simple, doesn't take very long, but it can have big impacts on the puppies as they age. As you go through these socialization activities, it's important not to interfere with normal social behaviors between puppies and the mom. So we want to try to fit this in where we can, but it shouldn't be taking over the normal interactions that are going to happen among the litter. So you'll see activities like the picking them up, start to set them on the floor. You're starting to talk to them so they get used to the sound of human voices. You can start to introduce toys that make noise so they're hearing other sounds as their ears open. You can introduce things like a crate at this age, 4 weeks old. You can start the process of house training by moving the soiled bedding to one area of the kennel. Start to encourage them to come to you. So lots of ideas here, starting again from day one and going through day 55. So you'll see ideas here for introducing collars and toys and treats and mimicking veterinary exams and all kinds of stuff. I think you guys will have access to this video if you want to revisit and take notes, but just some ideas. This should take about 5 to 10 minutes per litter as you go through these stages. And as often as you can do it is great. So if you have time to do it daily, that is fantastic, but really anything you do is better than nothing. Just try to get these activities in while they're at these ages. For some more ideas, here is another study that looked at a protocol. So in this protocol, it was done once per day, 5 days per week. And they had the socialization took place near the whelping box when the puppies were less than 1 week old. It took 5 minutes per puppy. From 2 to 3 weeks, they moved to a separate socialization area. It took 10 minutes per puppy. And in weeks 4 and 5, again, they were in the socialization area. And this time it was 15 minutes per puppy. And this study found that using this protocol that I'm about to show you, the puppies had significantly better temperament scores at 6 weeks of age if they went through the socialization protocol compared to puppies that did not. And so that's 6 weeks of age. They also assessed them at 8 months. And those puppies that went through the socialization protocol scored significantly better on measures related to separation anxiety, distraction, and general anxiety, as well as body sensitivity at 8 months. So again, fairly small investment in each puppy over the course of 5 weeks, paying off big time, even at 8 months of age. And here is the protocol there. So again, we're seeing collars, we're seeing the puppy getting handled, being exposed to different textures like a wool sweater, nylon t-shirt, towel, rubber glove, those kinds of things. So these are all the tactile stimuli that were part of the socialization protocol. And they were exposed to different things depending on how old they were. They also had auditory stimuli that the puppies were exposed to. And again, all this was done in the same, so 5, 10, or 15 minutes, depending on how old the puppies were. Sounds like a paper bag being rustled, mobile phone ringing, noisy items like a toy that was full of kibble being rolled near the puppies, all kinds of things. Visual stimuli as well, so things like a TV screen, a mobile hung above a crib. They did that for the puppies. A mirror can be something really interesting to introduce the puppies to. An umbrella. They just so this is not a super long list, right? But it is giving the puppy this exposure to a bunch of different things. Interaction with people, introducing them to different types of people, having the people interact with toys, restrain them, put them in a carrier, all those kinds of things, and interaction with the environment. So taking them outside when they were old enough, in arms, concrete, grass, those kinds of things. So not super complex stuff, but again, made a big difference even when the puppies were far beyond this and eight months old. They were still significantly different than puppies that did not get this exposure. And here are some other ideas as you come up with things that you would like to socialize your puppies to. Some of these were covered in the slides that I shared before, but just some more ideas that they're likely to run into as adults, but that you don't always think of when they're little and in that kennel environment. Another way to incorporate socialization into your routine that is a pretty easy lift is providing each dog its own portion of food. This is a really powerful way to create a positive association with people because, as I said, feeding was likely the cornerstone of that relationship and the shift towards domestication for dogs. And this really contributes to the human-animal bond. It's also an additional opportunity for your dogs to get attention, and this can reduce barking. And it also gives you a lot more information about the health or welfare status of individual dogs. It may ultimately require less food if you're feeding individually, particularly if you're feeding a high quality diet. And one study found that dogs fed a high quality diet were actually less stressed than dogs that were on a low quality diet. So even better. And this effect of the high quality diet, reducing stress, was magnified if feeding was coupled with some human interaction. So again, that individual feeding doesn't take much time or skill really compared to some of these other strategies we've talked about, but it can be a really powerful tool to help you create those positive associations. So we've talked a lot about puppies, and there's a reason for that. That is when you are most likely to get the best bang for your buck. But sometimes we need to socialize adults too. Not all adults are starting at the same place. They've had different experiences throughout their life. They have different temperaments. So it's harder to give you guys a one size fits all solution or a plan, but you are going to use the same principles. So you're still building staircases. And in general, I would recommend spending a week trying to identify where they are, how much socialization you think they'll need. They have a more fearful temperament, etc. I would also recommend individually feeding them if you aren't already. And then phase 2, start with eye contact, reinforcing eye contact, and getting them to approach you. Phase 3 could be getting them used to taking a treat from your hand and petting. Phase 4, introduce them to a collar and a leash. Phase 5, some of the experiences that we talked about with puppies, things like the sounds, the toys, all those kinds of stuff. And then phase 6 would be experiences outside the home kennel. So again, some dogs will already be ready for phase 5 right off the bat, but it's really important to spend the time assessing where the dogs are before you embark on adult socialization. Another thing about adopting out adult dogs is that the ideal age to do that is 3 to 7. Dogs over 7 are considered senior and have a much smaller pool of potential owners. So if you're able to retire a female at 4 to 5 years of age, that's recommended. And as I said, socialization should really use the same principles, but it may be a bigger challenge than it's going to be with puppies. It might require shorter, more taller, shorter steps that are shorter, but a much taller staircase. And it's going to be really important to be able to answer questions about how the dog is with children, other dogs, cats, men. Are they potty trained or housebroken? Are they crate trained? Those kinds of things are going to be potentially more important to work on when it comes to socialization, maybe a bigger challenge than it is for puppies. And I think this is also an opportunity for you guys to show your expertise and provide the adopter with information about how to continue socialization and use the principles that you guys have learned today. And word of mouth and repeat customers are going to be very important there. So one final note before we get to the conclusion, you can think of socialization somewhat like physical flexibility. There's going to be natural heritable variation in temperament. So going back to the very beginning of the talk, that's how the wolves became dogs, right? There was variability in how likely they were to approach people or how interested they were in people. Variability is the name of the game. And that same variability in a lot of different behaviors is still present in dogs today. So it's possible to have some puppies who get very little effort put into their socialization. And just by being raised in proximity to people, they turn out to be fearless and friendly and confident. And then there are other dogs who are not born that way. The goal of the socialization protocol is like stretching. If you get a kid, say, into gymnastics early and often, and you keep them practicing gymnastics or doing yoga, they're going to be a lot more flexible in their 30s than, say, I am right now. Now, I could start stretching today and be more flexible in a month than I am right now. But by starting so late, I'm never going to get as bendy as I could have been if I had started earlier. On the other hand, some people are born with really tight hamstrings or other physical issues, and they may need to stretch every day just to be comfortable moving around. But they could go through the exact same training as Simone Biles and never even be close to her level. So it's the same way with your dogs. The goal of socialization is to stretch the window of their possible temperament, but you're not guaranteed to always end up with the same output of this like super confident, fearless dog. You can move the needle in that direction. No matter where the dog starts, you can get them closer to that, but there really isn't a one size fits all outcome here. So to wrap up, a program for puppy socialization may be one of the best investments you can make. You're going to result in more appealing puppies and happier, healthier adult dogs. Socialization is a lifelong process, and it is never too late to start. And maybe most important, it should be fun. It should be fun for you. And even more important, it should be fun for the dogs. We want to keep these experiences very positive. We want to create those positive cognitive biases. And the knowledge that you have about socialization should definitely be passed to the owner. It's great for the dog to continue to get that kind of socialization and those experiences. And you're also creating better ambassadors for your business or your facility. That's all I've got. Happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you for going through that. That was such an amazing presentation. I feel like I learned so much. I'm sorry, I have a little barking dog in the background. And I feel like that was such a great note to end on, pointing out that socialization is really this investment for your program. I think from the good dog perspective, we really see that be such a testament to a breeder's program. And I kind of think of it as like the breeder's gift that keeps on giving. And I know early on in a placement process, buyers are really focused on how the puppy looks and how cute it is and all that went into the breeding of the sire and the dam. But I feel like it's only when the puppy goes home and starts really adapting to their new home so smoothly that they really start to fully absorb all of that socialization work. So I feel like that really comes to life once your puppy is placed. So definitely agree that it is a huge investment. And I do have to let you know that my seventh grade science fair project was about helping my dog overcome his fear of the vacuum. And I
Oh,
used treats as a way to do it. So that really was a full circle moment for me. Okay, we do have a few questions. You did answer a lot of them in the presentation already, which is great. We have a question about what you think some of the best ways are to socialize puppies before they're fully vaccinated, because I know that is a very big hurdle for buyers to overcome once they bring their new puppies home.
yeah, I think so. I'm not a veterinarian, right? And I'm sure vets would have advice on this as well. So definitely encourage adopters to talk to their vets about that. But I think a lot of the activities that I listed, not all of them by any means, require the dog to be exposed to things that could expose them to pathogens. So I think it can take a little bit more creativity, but the important thing in those early days is the dog is learning that new things are not scary. And there is a very long list of new things, whether it's a visual stimuli, tactile stimuli, auditory stimuli, that you can expose the dog to that aren't going to put them at risk at all. So I think the slides where I went through the different procedures and the list, there should be a lot of stuff on there that aren't going to put the dogs at risk.
Amazing. And that reminds me, I did want to mention to everyone that this is recorded. So we will have this sent out to our community via email tomorrow, and then it'll be up on our Facebook feed as well. So you can rewind, take notes on any part. But I just wanted to mention that because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to rewatch this. Another question we have is there a certification for breeders raising puppies with intensive or intentional socialization practices. I'm interested in differentiating puppies raised only for conformation and those raised to be family pets, service dogs, therapy dogs, etc.
So I'm not aware of any certification. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I'm not aware of it. I would argue that the socialization that I covered in this presentation, I know it sounded like a lot. I took up an hour, but that it is very basic socialization. Um, so I'm not sure if there's any sort of certification, but I think even the lower level, the confirmation socialization is still going to be quite a process. Certainly not as much as dogs that are going into service or more professional training, but even the bare bones socialization it is an undertaking that is well worth it.
And I don't know if for this next question you've encountered this in any of your work, but would you have any suggestions for a dog or a puppy who might not necessarily be food motivated when you're helping them start to overcome maybe some fears that they have?
Yeah, so not all dogs will work best for food. Um, Now, food tends to be the best bet, so I would encourage you to get creative and try different things. Um, sometimes dogs really like cat treats, like the little squeeze tubes. Those can be very palatable. Baby food without onions or garlic can be a great option. So you try different foods. Don't just stick to what's your go-tos. Try a bunch of different treats, but if that really isn't working, then you can try things like praise or petting. A lot of dogs really go crazy for access to a favorite toy. So you can, give them a few seconds of playing tug of war, for example, and then remove the toy and go back to the socialization work. So yeah, it is again not one size fits all. Whatever works for your dog is what's going to work. So just try everything you can think of until you find something that sticks.
Amazing. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. This is more about before puppies are born. Kelsey's wondering if the dam is stressed about a stimuli, should you remove her from the situation so that puppies don't see her stressed?
Yes, dogs they again they pay a lot of attention to us, as I mentioned. They are also picking up on their mom's response to things. So that's why it can also really help to have adults that are well socialized in your kennels, because they are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting and modeling that fearlessness to their puppies. So yes, you want to do whatever you can to reduce the dam stress. And in the short term, that might mean removing the stimulus. In the long term, I would encourage you to work on socializing her to that stimulus to ensure that you can get her to a place where she does feel confident with it, especially if it's something that's going to make the operation a lot easier.
Amazing. Okay, I think that was our last question that we have. Let me just quickly see if there are any more. No, I just see a lot of gratitude in the Facebook chat for this presentation. I couldn't echo that more. I think this was such a fascinating presentation. I learned so much. I loved particularly the part you touched on very briefly about the oxytocin release and the animal bond. I feel like we could have a whole presentation just about
Truly,
that.
there's
It's
some amazing work out there.
it's so amazing. I mean, I'm a huge dog lover, obviously, and I might be biased, but it felt very validating to hear about how unique that is. I don't know if it's the same for like cats or lizards or anything else, but very cool to see the science behind that. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us for this presentation. This was so amazing, and we are so happy we could have you here. And thank you to our audience for joining us for another Good Breeder webinar. If you're not yet a member of our community and you'd like to join, we would absolutely love to have you, and you can always apply at gooddog.com/join. And again, we will be having many more of these presentations with Purina throughout the rest of the year. So please keep up to date on our Facebook page, our newsletter, our private Facebook group, because we will be announcing our next one for, I believe it's August, very soon. So stay tuned for that. And until then, thank you all for being here, for being members of our community, and we will see you at our next webinar. Thank you so much, Dr. Valuska. Bye.
My
Bye,
pleasure.
everyone. Thank you.